I never told my son about the safe hidden inside the grandfather clock at the back of my shop. When he and his wife started making plans for my future without bothering to ask me, I made sure everything they said was being carefully recorded. One evening, while I was locking up, my shop assistant called me from the back room, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Calloway, you need to see this. They're inside." I had been waiting 18 months for exactly this moment, and the truth I had spent that time collecting was about to unravel every lie they had constructed around my life. I am grateful you are here with me. Before I tell you what happened in that back room, I want you to leave a comment that says the word "still" if you believe that protecting someone you love sometimes means letting them fall first. There is a particular kind of quiet that fills a clock shop at the end of the day. Not silence exactly. Clocks do not allow silence, but there is a rhythm to it. Something like a heartbeat, something like breathing. And after 38 years, I have stopped hearing it consciously the way you stop hearing your own pulse. My name is Thomas Calloway. I am 64 years old. Most people in Savannah know me as the man on Whitaker Street who fixes the things nobody else will touch. Grandfather clocks, mantle clocks, pocket watches passed down through families who have forgotten what they were worth. My shop, Calloway Clockworks, sits between a florist and a frame shop in a narrow building, with original heart pine floors and a front window I have never once covered with a blind, because I want people walking by to see the clocks. I want them to see that time is worth paying attention to. My wife, Patricia, started the business with me. She had the eye for the antiques, and I had the hands for the mechanics. Between us, we made something real, something that outlasted every. Patricia passed 6 years ago from a stroke that came without warning on an ordinary Tuesday morning. She was 59 years old. She was hanging new wind chimes on the porch when it happened. I found her when I came home for lunch. I sat beside her on the porch floor for a long time before I could make myself call anyone. We had 2 children. Our daughter, Melissa, lives in Portland. She calls every Sunday and sends birthday cards that arrive on time. She has her mother's practicality and her mother's directness, and I have never once doubted where I stand with her. Our son, Daniel, is 37 years old. He lives 12 minutes from my shop. He has his mother's cheekbones and my stubbornness. And somewhere in the years after Patricia died, he became someone I did not entirely recognize. Daniel's wife is named Courtney. She is 34, blonde, carefully polished in the way of someone who has worked very hard to appear effortless. She grew up in a smaller town in South Carolina and married Daniel 3 years after Patricia passed. I tried to love her the way you try to love anyone who loves your child. I genuinely tried. But from the first time she sat across from me at my kitchen table, I had the sense of being assessed, not welcomed, assessed. It started the way these things always start, with small things. A question here, a comment there, the kind of thing you could dismiss individually, but that stacked up over time into a shape you could not ignore. The first time Courtney asked about the shop's value, it was framed as concern. She mentioned that property on Whitaker Street had gone up significantly, and didn't I think it was worth having an appraisal done just for insurance purposes. I said the insurance was current. She smiled and changed the subject. 6 weeks later, Daniel asked me whether I had updated my will since his mother passed. I told him yes. He nodded and asked if I had a financial advisor. I told him I managed my own accounts. He said he just wanted to make sure I was being taken care of. I thanked him and watched his face for something I couldn't name. By the 2nd year after they married, the conversations had a pattern. They would visit on a Sunday, bring food, be warm and attentive for the first hour, and then at some point the topic would turn. My retirement timeline, my blood pressure, which was slightly elevated, and which Courtney brought up with the frequency of someone who wanted it on record. The hours I kept at the shop, whether it was really wise for a man my age to be climbing ladders to hang clock movements that weighed 40 pounds. My age. She said it the way people say it when they mean your expiration date. My son-in-law, Courtney's brother Marcus, told me something at a backyard cookout in April of that first year that I filed away without fully understanding. He had pulled me aside near the fence, ostensibly to admire my neighbor's rose bushes. Marcus was a decent man, quiet. A high school history teacher who seemed vaguely uncomfortable around his sister at times. He said, almost offhandedly, that Courtney had mentioned the shop a few times at family dinners, that she seemed very interested in the real estate value specifically. He said he thought I should know. I thanked him and told him I would keep my eyes open. After he went back to the food, I stood at that fence for a while looking at nothing, thinking about what Patricia used to say. Patricia had a phrase she used when she was teaching me the trade. She would say, "A clock that runs wrong is more dangerous than one that has stopped, because at least the stopped one knows it needs fixing." She meant it about movements and escapements, but she meant other things too. Patricia always meant other things too. 3 months after that cookout, Daniel came to the shop on a Wednesday afternoon with a folder of papers. He set it on my workbench between us, like a settlement offer. "Dad, I have been doing some research about estate planning," he said. "There are options that could save the family a significant amount in taxes when the time comes." I looked at the folder. Inside was a printed packet about family trusts and a second document about transferring business ownership. The business, specifically, to a family LLC managed jointly. I turned the pages slowly. "Managed by whom?" I asked. He said he and Courtney had talked to an attorney. I said I had my own attorney. He said he knew, but this attorney specialized in small business succession. I closed the folder and handed it back to him. I told him I was glad he was thinking about these things and that I would be in touch with my own attorney. He left looking like a man who had expected a different answer. That evening I called my own attorney, a woman named Sandra Okafor, who had handled Patricia's estate and who had been my legal counsel for 11 years. I told her about the folder and the family LLC suggestion. Sandra was quiet for a moment and then she said, "Thomas, I want you to come in tomorrow morning. Bring everything you remember about that conversation." I did. Sandra and I sat across from each other in her office on Drayton Street for 2 hours. She was careful in the way good lawyers are careful. She did not rush to conclusions, but she outlined what a scenario like this could look like if it went a certain direction. She told me that the first step was to make sure my estate documents were completely up to date and airtight. She also said, and this is the part that stayed with me, that I should start keeping records, dates, conversations, anything that struck me as unusual. She said she was not trying to alarm me. She said she just wanted me to be protected. I went back to the shop and stood in the back room for a long time. The back room was where I did the real work, where the bench and the magnification lamps and the parts drawers were, and where the clocks people trusted me with lived while they waited for my attention. Along the back wall stood 4 clocks I had been restoring over the past several months. A Federal period tall case clock, mahogany, circa 1810. A Seth Thomas mantle clock with a painted dial. A small Black Forest cuckoo clock that a woman had brought in after finding it in her grandmother's attic. And in the corner, the one I had been working on longest, a Vienna regulator. Early 19th century, Austrian, with a single weight movement and a deadbeat escapement that had not functioned properly in decades. It was the most complex piece I had worked on in years. Patricia would have loved it. She always said the Viennese made their clocks the way the English made their furniture, as if they expected it to outlast everyone who ever owned it. I looked at those 4 clocks and something settled in my mind the way a gear settles into its correct position. I knew what I needed to do. The next morning, I went to see a private investigator named Roy Desmond. Roy had been recommended to me by an old friend who was a retired county judge, a man who trusted Roy completely and had used him twice in contentious estate matters. Roy was 58, former military, and had an office above a dry cleaner on Montgomery Street that smelled perpetually of pressed fabric. He listened to everything I told him without writing anything down, which I took as a sign that he was actually listening. When I finished, he asked 2 questions. How much documentation do you already have? And how far are you willing to let this go before you act? I told him I had a notebook I had been keeping for 3 months. He asked me to bring it on my next visit. He told me his rates. I wrote him a check. Over the following months, Roy confirmed what I had suspected and uncovered what I had not. The visits to my shop by Daniel and Courtney had included, on at least 2 occasions when I was not present, informal conversations with my assistant, Beverly, in which Courtney had asked questions about the shop's revenue, about how many hours I worked, about whether I had ever mentioned selling. Beverly, who had worked with me for 9 years and who had liked Patricia enormously, had told Roy about these conversations with barely contained fury. She had not said anything to me because she had not wanted to upset me, she said, without being sure of what she was seeing. Roy told her she was seeing exactly what she thought she was seeing. In November, Roy told me something that changed the temperature of everything. Courtney had met twice, in the past 6 weeks, with a commercial real estate broker who specialized in historic district properties. Not to buy, to assess. She had described herself as a potential seller of a clockmaker's shop on Whitaker Street and had asked for a ballpark figure on what such a property would fetch. The broker had given her a number. Roy had the number. I wrote it in my notebook and sat with it for a long time. I called Marcus the following week and asked him to meet me for coffee. He drove across town on a Saturday morning and sat across from me at a table near the window of a coffee shop on Broughton Street, and I watched his face while I told him what Roy had found. He did not look surprised. Exactly. He looked like a man who had been hoping he was wrong about something. He said Courtney had always been this way about money, that their parents had not had much growing up and that she had developed a kind of fixation on financial security that had no ceiling. He said he loved his sister, but that he had learned not to loan her money and not to co-sign anything with her name on it. He said he was sorry. I told him he did not need to apologize for someone else's choices. I asked if he would be willing to write down what he had told me at the cookout in April, formally, as a written statement. He said yes without hesitation. My son Daniel came to the shop alone in January. It was a cold morning, wet, the kind of Savannah winter that isn't dramatic but gets into your bones. He came in through the front and stood at the counter looking at the clocks in the window for a moment before he turned to me. "Dad, I want to talk about the future," he said. His voice had that careful quality it gets when Courtney has helped him rehearse something. I said, "All right." He said that he and Courtney had been thinking that it might make more sense for me to consider a transition, a gradual handover of the business, so that I could step back and enjoy things while I was still healthy enough to do so. I asked him what enjoying things meant to him. He said traveling maybe, not working 60 hours a week. He said the shop was a lot for one person my age. My age. There it was again. I told him I appreciated his concern and that I had been in conversation with my attorney about my plans. He asked what plans. I said my long-term plans for the shop and the estate. I said I would keep him informed. He left frustrated, which I noted in my notebook that evening, along with the date and the exact phrases he had used. It was Patricia's birthday in February when I found the letter. I had gone up to the attic for the first time in nearly a year to find a photograph I wanted to frame for the shop. While I was moving boxes, I came across a small cedar chest I had not opened since we moved it up there after Patricia passed. Inside were her journals, some letters, pressed flowers from our anniversary, and at the very bottom, an envelope with my name on it in her handwriting. She had written below my name, in smaller letters, "For when you need it." I sat on the attic floor in my coat and read it twice. Patricia had written it 5 months before she died, which meant she had written it without knowing she was going to die. She had written it because she was Patricia, and Patricia thought ahead. The letter said she worried about Daniel. Not in a way that was a condemnation, in a way that was the specific worry of a mother who sees her child clearly and loves him anyway. She wrote that she feared Courtney was someone who would always want more than what was in front of her, and that Daniel was someone who had always needed to be loved by whoever was in the room with him. She wrote that if I ever found myself feeling like I was being managed rather than cared for, I should trust that feeling. She wrote that the shop was built by both of us and that she wanted it protected. She wrote, "Tom, you always knew how to take things apart and put them back together better than they were. Do that here." I sat in the attic for a long time. Then I went back downstairs and called Roy Desmond. I told Roy it was time to move toward an endpoint. He told me he had been collecting documentation for 8 months and that what he had would be sufficient. Sandra Okafor and I met the following week to finalize the legal protections. My updated will left the shop to a preservation trust with instructions for continued operation, with provisions for both Melissa and Daniel contingent on conditions Sandra had helped me craft carefully. The transfer of the business to any LLC or outside entity was specifically blocked under multiple clauses. Sandra also filed certain documents with the probate court to establish a clear paper trail of my intentions and my mental competency, because she wanted that baseline established and on record. I thanked her for thinking of it. The hiding places came to me naturally. I had spent 38 years building things inside clock cases, behind false backs, within the hollow chambers of movements. I knew these spaces better than anyone who might come looking. The federal tall case clock received a waterproof envelope tucked behind the secondary weights compartment, sealed and placed flat against the backboard. Inside, Sandra's documentation, my updated will, the letter Patricia had written, and Roy's full investigative report. The Seth Thomas mantel clock had a space beneath the movement tray, accessed by removing two non-obvious screws, where I placed copies of the financial records Roy had pulled together and Marcus's written statement. The cuckoo clock from the grandmother's attic was never going to be searched. I placed Beverly's written account of Courtney's questions there, along with photographs Roy had taken at the real estate broker's office, time-stamped, showing Courtney in the doorway. The Vienna regulator I saved for last. Patricia had always said that the best hiding place is the one that looks like it is already hiding something. The Vienna regulator was conspicuously the most valuable piece in my back room. It was the one anyone with ambition would notice first. I let it continue to look unfinished, parts laid out around it, tools nearby, as though the job was ongoing and complicated. Inside the case, behind the false back panel that I had installed myself during restoration, was a small digital recorder. I had been using it for 4 months. Every time Daniel or Courtney came into the shop, every conversation they initiated about money or the business or my health, I had recorded it. The recordings were on an SD card inside the recorder. The recorder was in a sealed plastic bag. The Vienna regulator stood in the corner of my back room looking patient and unfinished, which is exactly what I needed it to look like. I told Beverly enough that she understood the situation without details that would worry her. She said, "Mr. Calloway, I have been waiting for you to do something about this for months." I told her I needed her to continue doing what she did, which was run the front of the shop with grace and tell me immediately if anyone came in when I was not there. She said she could do that. She did it 4 times in the following 2 months. Each time she called me, and each time, reviewing the security footage, I found Courtney or Daniel moving through the shop in ways that people move when they are looking for something. In March, Beverly called me at 6:40 in the evening on a Tuesday. I had left the shop at 5:30. She had stayed late to finish an inventory update. "Mr. Calloway," she said, her voice low and carefully controlled. "They are here, both of them." They came in through the back. The back door had a combination lock I had not changed in years. Daniel knew the code. I had given it to him years ago for emergencies. I was in my car in 12 minutes. I parked on the side street and entered through the front, which they would not be expecting. The shop was dark, except for the light coming from the back room. I could hear movement. The careful kind. The kind people make when they believe no one is listening. I stood in the doorway of the back room for a moment before either of them heard me. Courtney had her phone out. She was photographing the contents of a file drawer I kept near my bench. Daniel was standing in the middle of the room with his hands in his pockets, and the expression on his face when he saw me was not guilt. Not exactly. It was the expression of a man who had known something was wrong for a long time and had chosen, repeatedly, to look somewhere else. "My son," I said. "Dad." He started forward. "We were just—" I held up my hand. "I am going to ask you both to sit down." They sat on the stools near my bench. Courtney's jaw was tight. She had composure. I gave her that. Daniel looked at the floor. I pulled my own stool around to face them, and I sat down and I let the silence run for a moment because the clocks would fill it. They always did, and because I wanted them to feel it. "I have spent 18 months, I said, "watching and listening and documenting." I said it quietly, the way you state a fact, not as an accusation, just as what had happened. I told them about the notebook. I told them about Roy Desmond. I told them about Sandra Okafor and the updated estate documents. I told them about Marcus's statement and Beverly's account and the photographs from the real estate broker's office. I told them about the recordings. Courtney stood up. "That is illegal," she said. "South Carolina is a one-party consent state," I told her. I looked at my son. "Daniel, I am going to tell you something, and I need you to hear it. Your mother wrote me a letter before she died. She worried about you. Not about who you were, but about who you might let yourself become if you gave someone else permission to steer your choices." I watched his face. He was somewhere between his wife and his father, and I could see the distance between those two places written all over him. I reached back and unlocked the Vienna regulator case. I removed the recorder from behind the panel and set it on the bench between us. Then, I pressed play. The first voice was Courtney's, recorded in this room 2 months ago when Beverly had called me. She was talking to Daniel in the way she talked when she believed she was not being recorded, which was faster and less careful. She was talking about timelines, about how long a man my age could reasonably be expected to run a business like this without, as she put it, something happening. She talked about what the property would sell for and what they would do with it. She said the word stubborn in relation to me in a tone that was not affectionate. The second recording was from 4 months ago. Daniel's voice this time. He was on the phone, not knowing I had left the recorder running when I stepped out. He was talking to someone, and the conversation made clear he had already spoken to an attorney about contesting a will under grounds of diminished capacity. Not because there was evidence of any such thing, because he wanted a legal framework in place in case he needed it. I stopped the recorder. Daniel looked like someone had removed the floor from under him. He was not a bad man, my son. That was the part that had made this so hard to carry. He was a man who loved his wife, and who had let her love become something he built his moral compass around, and that compass had drifted badly. "Dad," he said. His voice had changed. "I didn't. What you just heard. That was—" He stopped. He could not finish any of the sentences. "The rest of what I need to say, I said clearly and without raising my voice. I told them that my attorney had copies of everything, that Roy Desmond had filed his report with a third party in a sealed document, that the estate was protected in ways they would not be able to challenge successfully, that I had no intention of pressing criminal charges because Daniel was my son and because what I wanted was not punishment. What I wanted was for this to stop. Then I said, 'Courtney, I am asking you to leave my shop.' She left. She did not look at Daniel when she left. That told me something. Daniel sat on his stool for a long time after the back door closed. The clocks ticked around us, and the Vienna regulator stood open, with its secrets removed, and its movement still as steady as the day I had finished it. Outside, Savannah was doing what it does at night, warming down slowly from the day, the river out there somewhere carrying the dark toward the ocean. I did not rush him. I waited the way I have always waited with difficult things, the way the trade taught me, because the hardest repairs are the ones where you cannot force anything, where you have to hold the piece in your hands and let it show you what it needs. "Dad, I am so sorry." He said it to the floor. "I ruined everything." "Not everything," I said. "Not yet." He looked up. "I said that the trust your mother built for this family was not only money and property. It was the idea that people can change direction, that they can look at what they have become and choose differently." I told him I was not offering him forgiveness tonight because I was not there yet, and I told him that honesty meant more to me than a quick peace. But I told him that the door between us was not closed. He left an hour later. He did not make any promises, and I did not ask for any. He walked out through the front of the shop, past the clocks in the window, into the night air. Beverly called me the next morning before I had opened. She had seen the news alert on her phone. A local business news site had published a brief piece about a property consultation that had been conducted under false pretenses. Roy had connected a journalist he trusted with the real estate broker, who had confirmed the details of Courtney's visit and was not happy about having been used. Courtney's name was not in the piece, but anyone who knew the story would know. Within 2 weeks, Courtney had moved out of Daniel's house. I did not hear this from Daniel. I heard it from Melissa, who had flown in from Portland without telling me, and who appeared at the shop on a Thursday afternoon and sat on the high stool near my bench and looked at me the way her mother used to look at me when she had something to say. "You could have called me," she said. "I know," I said. "I did not want to involve you until there was something definitive to tell you." She looked at the Vienna regulator, now back in its corner with its case closed, fully restored, keeping perfect time. She asked me if I was all right. I told her I was getting there. Marcus called me the following month. He said he was sorry about the way things had unfolded with his family. I told him he had done the right thing twice, once at that backyard cookout and once when I had asked him for a written statement, and that I did not hold him responsible for anyone's choices but his own. He asked if I needed anything. I said I did not. He said he might bring his daughter into the shop sometime, because she had her great-grandmother's wind-up music box, and it had not run in years. I told him to bring it in any time. Daniel called me for the first time in 6 weeks on a Sunday morning in early May. He did not ask about the estate. He did not ask about the shop. He asked if he could come in on a Tuesday and help me with some deliveries I had mentioned needing to make. I said yes. He came in and we worked side by side for 4 hours and spoke about small things. The traffic on Abercorn Street. A clock movement he found interesting. A lunch recommendation Beverly had. At the end of the afternoon he said, "Thank you." And I said, "You are welcome." And we stood outside the front of the shop in the afternoon light, and both looked at the clocks in the window for a moment, the way two people look at something they do not want to stop looking at. He came back the following Tuesday, and the one after that. Patricia would have known how to measure this. She had a gift for knowing where a repair stood, for telling at a glance whether a movement was 60% healed, or 90, whether the remaining work was minor, or whether there were deeper problems still to surface. I never had that gift to the same degree. I just kept working and paid attention. My name is Thomas Calloway. I am 64 years old. I run a clock shop on Whitaker Street in Savannah, Georgia, and I have spent 38 years learning that time does not heal anything on its own. Time is just the medium. What you do inside it is what determines whether the thing you are working on runs again. My wife left me a letter I was not supposed to need and did. My son let someone turn him into something he was not, and then found his way back from it, slowly. The way things actually heal when they heal for real. My daughter calls every Sunday. My shop assistant, Beverly, makes better coffee than I do, and has more sense than the rest of us combined. The Vienna regulator stands in the corner of my back room, restored, running, keeping time with the precision the people who built it expected it would. There are things inside it now that nobody knows about. The memory of what I hid there and then removed, the months of waiting, the weight of carrying something alone for longer than I wanted to. A clock that has been properly repaired does not advertise what it went through to get back to working. It just runs. It keeps the time it was made to keep, and it does not complain about the hands that took it apart. I think about Patricia most mornings when I unlock the front door and hear the shop come alive around me. I think about that phrase she used to say, about the clock that runs wrong being more dangerous than the one that has stopped. I think about how she saw things I was not ready to see, and wrote them down for me anyway, trusted me to find them when I needed them. Some people leave tools, some people leave warnings. Patricia left both, and she left them in the one place she knew I would eventually look. If this story made you feel something real, drop the number 1 in the comments below. And if you know someone who is carrying something alone right now, someone who is watching and waiting and hoping they are wrong, share this with them. Sometimes the most important thing you can do for a person is let them know they are not the only one who has been through it.